We might get started then. It's 8:15. So, thanks again, as Simon mentioned, for coming. First session of the day. It's always hard. Good to see a few coffees in hand. Not too many sore heads. Hopefully, save that for tomorrow. Our session today is Office 365 security everywhere you need it to be. If that's not the session you want to be in, then now's the time to leave. As Simon mentioned, Michael Richards from Microsoft went through a Office 365 security and compliance what's new session yesterday, which sort of talked through at a high level a number of the changes and new features and things like that have come up in the platform. So what we wanted to do was follow on from that session today and take some of our customer learnings and take some of our real world experience and talk you through that, and then also do some demonstrations towards the end to show you how easy and simple it is to get some of these security controls and compliance controls in place. So a little bit about us. So I'm James Lewis. I'm an infrastructure consultant at Cloud Solutions in New South Wales. So I've been working with Office 365 and BPOS and MS Online for about the last 4 years or so. It's our contact details there. Feel free to reach out if you've got any questions or anything like that. I also run the Office 365 user group in Sydney as well. So if anyone's in New South Wales, then we'd love to have you along there. There's a link in the deck you can click to go along to that. We also run user groups in the other cities. So if you jump on Meetup, you'll be able to search for that. Just quickly, Cloud. Might as well plug our company while I'm here. So we've recently won some prestigious Microsoft Partner Awards in the US. So we're the Cloud Productivity Partner of the Year Award. We're also a finalist in that Enterprise Mobility category as well. And just one other point to note, our Cloud blog there as well. So we have a bunch of really smart guys that write about all sorts of interesting stuff to do with the public cloud. So if you get a chance to check that out, then I encourage you to do so.
Thanks, James. Simon Waite. I generally don't tend to talk about Office 365, so I'm the rope in here to kind of be the person to show you how easy it is to do this stuff. I generally tend to focus on Azure application development and infrastructure. So my role today is I'm going to talk a bit about some of the stuff along with James, and I'm going to run some of the demos for him as well. So thanks a lot for coming this morning, and I'll hand over to James to get us started.
Yeah, so if Simon can do the demos, then anyone will be able to do the demos. So
well, they're not just click next finish demos, right?
Next. Cool. So I thought I'd kick us off with a quote. Everybody loves a quote, and a Gartner quote nonetheless. So when we're putting together the prep for this session, and we thought about what we wanted the attendants to get out of it, it was pretty much that Office 365 security is very easy to do. Organisations, and especially organisations outside of the US, are paying an opportunity cost by not leveraging the public cloud for some of these things. So there's a lot of fear and misconceptions about some of these things. And what we wanted you to do today was to help you break through some of those fears and misconceptions and get you started with Office 365 security. Sorry, I'll just take a break.
What happened?
All right, so
Slide go.
why is what happened?
Don't know.
All right, so why is Office 365 security important? So I guess as custodians of your organisation's data, nobody wants to be in the headlines. And if you look up there, there's some doozies, some recent ones, some interesting ones that you'll see there. The Canadian theatre critic that broke the recent story about a new contract signing for one of the rugby league players in Sydney. So I think if you remember back to the keynote, there was a lot of controls and a lot of things that are available to you out of the box that would prevent these sort of leaks and these sort of breaches happening. So we understand that as custodians of your data, of your company's data and your organisation's data, it's not a trivial thing to move things into the public cloud. So what we want to do is help to explain that Office 365 has come a long way since the days of BPOS and MS Online and things like that. So there's a lot of things that are available to you outside of the box that you can switch on today, and then stop yourself from being in these sort of positions. So what we wanted to cover in the session overview today was sort of three areas, right? So the first area is the pillars of Office 365 security. So you would have heard a lot about those. We talked about them in the keynote. Michael Richards in his session yesterday went through them in a lot of detail. We're going to talk to you about how transparent and how Microsoft takes those things very seriously. The second section of the session we want to talk about is security assessments and some of the common themes that we see when we're speaking to our customers and some of the common things that come up. And then we want to take you through how Office 365 security can address some of these common themes and then make it easy for you to have confidence in a transition to the public cloud, or if you're already using it, how you can switch on some of these capabilities to make your current security posture even stronger. So if that sounds good, we'll get started after one last point. So we wanted to have a little dig at the security guys in the room. So hopefully there's not too many pure security guys. But I guess as IT pros in that sort of space, that a lot of the time the security guys seem to be the guys that are putting the know into technology. So if there's any sort of key takeaway that we want you to take away from the session today, it's that we want to turn those no's into yeses and arm you guys with the information and the confidence to have those conversations with your security teams, with your legal teams, and be able to shift and move more additional workloads into Office 365 and be comfortable using it. On that, I'm going to hand over to Simon to talk about the pillars of Office 365 security.
Thanks, James. I thought that slide before would have elicited a bit more of a response, putting the no into technology. That's all right. Maybe everyone's heard it before. I apologise, that was my idea. So as James said, I'm going to talk to you about the pillars of Office 365 security. So when Microsoft talks to you about Office 365 and the way they manage security, compliance and trust, they split it up into these 5 key areas. So you've got privacy, transparency, compliance, security and continuity. Now, I'm not going to deep dive on every single one of these pillars and every single one of these areas, but what I did want to focus on in this section was just the areas that I've highlighted here, and I'll talk about each one of these individually. Under privacy, the key takeaway from Office 365 is that the data that you put into Office 365 is your data. If you don't want to stay in Office 365, you can take it with you. If you deploy something like rights management services Michael talked about yesterday, you can actually kill that data when it's in Office 365, even if you don't want to take it out of Office 365 and no one can access it. Microsoft's not trying to do anything with that data. They've got a multi-tenant environment where when you push your data into an Exchange environment that's deployed in Office 365, it's your Exchange environment. It may use platform as a service components inside of the Office 365 environment to actually service requests for mail services, but ultimately the data is stored in a containerized way that means it's yours and no one else has access to it. Michael referenced yesterday the customer lockbox feature that's coming that will increase the transparency that's actually available to you as a customer to see when you make service requests to Microsoft and they need to help you solve issues in your tenant, you'll be able to actually see that process end to end and have the approval process come to you as the custodian of your organisation's data for approval. The next thing I wanted to talk about was customers knowing where their data is stored, and that's a key one, right? Microsoft's made a very big investment in building a large amount of data centre capacity around the world, primarily to deal with the challenges of data sovereignty in various countries. Just last week we had a big announcement of new data centre capacity being stood up in both the UK and Germany. And Germany is a big one because they're actually quite intense about the way they manage their data. So even in Germany, the Office 365 service will be operated on Microsoft's behalf by a local data manager. So Microsoft won't have direct access to that environment. It will be managed on their behalf. We know certainly of other similar sorts of services where there's been customers that have pushed their data into one geographic region and then they've had their data moved to other geographic regions. That doesn't happen with Microsoft. They make the commitment that it will stay in the geography into which it's deployed. Obviously, as new capabilities are stood up, you can have the option to move data around, such as the new Australian tenants now giving you the opportunity to bring your data, say, from Southeast Asia and Singapore into Australia. But typically when you push your data into a particular geography, it doesn't go anywhere. It stays where you put it. Compliance is a big one. It's fine to make all these kind of motherhood statements about how great security is and what good things we do when we take hold of your data and manage it on your behalf. But it's actually the compliance that is the proof that we're doing what we say, that someone has come in and audited us and the processes that we use and said, we like what we see and these guys are following the right process and doing what they say they're doing. The two key ones for us here in Australia, the Australian Certified Cloud Services List from the ASD was a big one. That now has effectively given a big tick of approval to use Office 365 and Azure as a place to store governmental information in Australia. And then ISO 27001, which is information management security, which applies globally across all of the Office 365 tenants that are stood up around the world. And that's just about the processes and approaches that are used to actually managing the data when it's pushed into the environment. So they're key ones. Finally, in security space, this one comes up all the time for us, and Michael touched on it yesterday. Encryption at rest and in transit. And it's always a big one because you push back on some of the people that are asking those questions. You say, well, do you have that in your own data centers today? And in many cases, the answer is no. But the perception is that once it's outside my firewall, I need to start to do all of these things to make sure that I'm happy that my data is secured. I won't deep dive on it, but a key example of that is all the changes that happened in the SharePoint Online environment over the last 18 months, where Microsoft's re-architected kind of the underlying content database and content management capabilities of the platform, such that files that you now upload into SharePoint Online are broken up into blocks, stored in blob storage. Each of those individual blocks is encrypted with its own key. The content database that holds the information about where those blobs are stored is also encrypted with its own key. And ultimately, all those keys are controlled by a master key and a HSM key vault that you don't have at the moment direct access to. But Microsoft is kind of saying, we're doing all of this stuff. So even if someone manages to pull a blob out of the SharePoint Online backend storage system, they've got one block that's encrypted and they have no way of knowing what other blocks they would need to bring back together to create the file and then decrypt that file. So that's a big thing, I think. And data loss prevention. So we'll talk a little bit about this later. So people aren't always trying to maliciously help you lose your data. Quite often it's, oops, I didn't realise I did that. And we saw that on some of the examples back on that first page where people may be meant to send it to Simon Wright and they send it to Simon Waite. Trust me, that happens to me all the time. And I think we can all reflect on times where we've sent the wrong person the wrong email because auto-suggestion actually replaced someone's name in Outlook for us or other mail clients we may be using. I did want to touch just briefly, we're not going to go into to too much detail on the add-on services that are available to you, but I did want to talk about sort of the core feature set for Office 365 a little bit and then touch on Enterprise Mobility Suite just a bit. So out of the box with Office 365 on some of the business SKUs and the e-SKUs or the enterprise level offerings that we're going to be talking about, we get these services across each of these three areas. So in your identity and access management, everything's based off Azure Active Directory. It kind of underpins all of Microsoft's online services and not only Office 365 but Dynamics Online and those sorts of things. That's what drives the identity and access management. You do out of the box get multi-factor authentication and you get single sign-on if you choose to federate your on-premises directory with Azure Active Directory. Mobile device management. So some of this trickled down from the sort of the Big Brother Intune offering into the Office 365 core. So we'll have a look at that later as you have out of the box mobile device management that gives you some good capabilities actually. It's actually quite surprising how deep the capability is out of the box with that. And then finally, rights management service. So that's driven out of Active Directory Rights Management Service. And that allows you to do the protection of content stored in SharePoint Online and through the sending of mail through Exchange Online as well. If those default features out of the box aren't enough for your enterprise, The next obvious step out of that is to go to Enterprise Mobility Suite, or EMS. Again, across those three pillars, it's basically an extension of what you get out of the box with Office 365. You can extend the same feature set you have for your logins to all your Microsoft applications to other cloud-based applications. You can do self-service password and group management with Enterprise Management Suite, and you can also do some stuff down on-prem if you've got complicated identity lifecycle management issues by standing up Microsoft Identity Manager. MDM for Office 365, this space is kind of where Intune comes into play. You get extensions out into management of desktop environments, and you'll also get mobile application management. You would have seen Brad Anderson in the keynote on Tuesday do a great demo of managed applications and what you can do with those from a containerized copying and pasting type features. I know in the meantime there's been some announcements around the fact that you now don't need necessarily to have Intune stood up to be able to do the mobile application management packaging, but it's an interesting feature nonetheless. And then finally, RMS in EMS, you can extend that down onto doing file share protection down on-prem, and also leverage email notifications on lifecycle events. So that's me for this section. I'm going to hand back to James, who's going to talk a little bit about security assessments we typically see at some of our customers when we go out to engage with them. James.
Yeah, and I think just back to your last point around the EMS piece, so I think we see a lot of our customers starting to get EMS SKUs added onto their eSKUs as well. So it's really important to, especially if you are assessing the service and you do have some additional sort of higher level security controls, that you can have a look at that EMS suite to have a look at through those. All right, so the second section we want to talk about was security assessments and what we sort of see when we're out in the field. So typically what we see is two different types of assessments. So I think we saw a few people before that are in the process of assessing the platform. So what we see in that phase is that we see people doing a commercial assessment of the platform. So that's sort of like a higher level assessment, an assessment of whether Office 365 is right for your organisation as a platform, whether it meets all of the legal T's and C's, whether you can store data in the right location, whether your RTOs and RPOs and things like that are okay. And then typically that might be your technology staff doing a high level assessment, and then your legal and compliance team coming in and then looking at it in a little bit more detail. Excuse me. So the second type of assessment we see is around the operational and the data assessment. So this assessment typically is what happens after someone in IT has bought Office 365 and the horse is sort of bolted, and you come back and people are getting a little bit nervous about what you're actually doing. You might have run a proof of concept or something like that. So what we see here is looking at all of the day-to-day sort of operational aspects of the service, you know, how your data's being managed and stored and handled, and making sure that those things align with your corporate, you know, policies and standards and things like that. So typically what we see when we go into those sort of assessments is, you know, the typical standard sort of security threat risk assessment matrices. So we'll see, you know, what are the different threats, where are they coming from, you know, what's the likelihood that the risk will occur, and then if that risk or that threat or whatever does occur, then what's the impact of that? So, you know, is it a reputational risk? Is it a monetary risk? Is it some sort of other risk? And then based on that, those two, the risk likelihood and the risk impacts, different organisations will have different calculations to come up with an overall risk rating. Now, I guess what we've seen over the years is, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, basically those risk ratings would be extreme, off the charts. You can't do anything with the service, and there's no way we're going to put anything into it. And then you'd look at the risk mitigations and look at what you could do to potentially, you know, reduce some of that risk. And there wasn't necessarily always a good story around that things. I mean, even you know, the geography of where your data's being stored. You know, up until sort of last year, you weren't able to store your data in country, which immediately ruled out. You know, you've got an extreme an extreme risk that can't be overcome. So you shut down the conversations about moving your workloads to the public cloud altogether. So I think what we're seeing now, and what we sort of the message we want to get across today is, you really need to dust off those risk assessments that if you've done them over the years. And then start to have a look at some of those things that Simon was talking about, and some of the controls and the protections available to us that we'll talk about later. And then look at what when you apply those controls, what those residual risk impacts and risk gradings will be. And you'll find that where you might have had an extreme problem before, or a high risk before, that's now into a more manageable sort of category. And that's what we see and help many of our customers with. So moving towards the sort of top 5 common risks that we see amongst our customers. Anyone want to have a go at what some of those might be? Michael talked about some of them. Brad Anderson talked about some of them in the keynote. Well, they're all... Whoop. That's one. Very good. Yeah. People. Yeah, credential, weak authentication, absolutely. So data leakage or loss. I think, if we think back to the slide with all those headings and the headlines and things like that, if you're an administrator or you're a manager that's looking to move your workloads into the public cloud, then effectively you don't want to lose your job because somebody does something silly and your data gets compromised, and then you're all over the news and things like that. So data leakage and loss is one of the sort of common risks that people come to us to talk about. Weak authentication and poor separation of duties. So those sort of things go together, and it's amazing how many people do not enforce strong password policies in their on-premises environment that flow through to the cloud, or they have one admin account that's used for everything, or domain admins. And there was a session yesterday I was going to where they were talking about people that use domain admin for lots of different functions, and how you can protect or how you should sort of manage and control those sort of things. So these are absolutely common things that come up. So malware phishing is another concern, especially for obviously email and communication workloads. So we're going to talk through a little bit. Michael did a good session yesterday on some of the new advanced threat protection capabilities within Exchange Online Protection that really takes some of that malware and phishing protections to the next level. And then lastly, as Chris mentioned before, access from untrusted devices off the network. So again, one of the big selling points and one of the productivity benefits of moving to Office 365 is that you can access the service from anywhere, anytime, from any device. And that freaks a lot of people out. So all of the IT pros and like the productivity guys are excited about that, and then the security guys and the IT managers are absolutely not excited about that. What we'll talk through first is back to some of those commercial mitigations that you'd be looking at when you're maybe assessing the service for the first time. So this is the Office 365 Trust Center here. So hands up, has anyone looked at the Office 365 Trust Center before? So when you're having conversations about security, risk, compliance, things like that, the Office 365 Trust Center is absolutely your starting point. There's a wealth of information in there that explains how some of the more complex aspects of the service work, and can help you if you're a partner or a vendor. There's resources in there that can actually help you respond to RFPs and things like that as well. So it's definitely a great resource to point people in your organisation that want to understand these things in a bit more detail towards. Like I mentioned there, so you can work with partners and Microsoft to get you additional answers. So when we were doing our planning for this session, another resource that came up, and again Michael talked about it in a bit more detail yesterday, was the Trust Portal. So that takes it to the next level, where as Michael was explaining yesterday, Microsoft have a lot of auditing and compliance reports done about their platforms and their services. They were previously made available to you through your partner team and through a complex sort of process of arranging things, and you might not have been able to get that information as quickly as you wanted, or your legal or compliance team may have needed some information. So the Trust Portal basically allows you to get information that's very specific based on the region that you're in and the industry you're in. So you could select Australia and banking and finance, and that will trim it down to some very specific reports and information that you'll be interested in. Now those are made to you made available to you under NDA. People can, I believe, like if you have a test tenant, you can sign in, request some of that information, and the request will go to Microsoft, and then they'll obviously provide that to you. The other cool thing about the Trust Portal is that you can delegate access to that portal as well. So you don't necessarily need to be managing those requests, so you can delegate access to that to someone in your team that might need it, and then they can go off and access things as they become available. And I think, again, as Michael noted yesterday, Office 365 as a service is an evergreen service, so the service itself is evolving. And obviously all of the compliance and security controls and things like that evolve with it. So this isn't like a static page. This will evolve and move as Microsoft roll more things into the platform as it becomes more secure. And also provide up-to-date audit reports and things like that. So if that's a requirement of your organisation, you can get that information as it becomes available. All right. So next we'll move into some of the more interesting operational mitigations that we can take for the Office 365 platform. And one of the first reporting sort of mitigations that we can take is the anomaly reporting feature. Now this sort of became available, I can't remember now, maybe 12 months ago. And it started out with just 4 very simple reports. With your AAD basic license that comes with a normal Office 365 tenant, you effectively get these couple of basic reports. But you'll see here in the screenshot that we've got, the premium reports come along with EMS. So when you get an AAD premium tenant, you start to get a whole bunch more information and more reports. And I think you were going to talk to that.
That's all right. I'll do a
right.
demo. That's fine.
All right.
Okay. All right. So we're going to just have a quick look at this. So got a test tenant that we've set up here. So the reporting examples will not be extensive, but they will give you a feel for the sort of scenarios that you get when you use the reports that come with the service. So here I'm already logged into my Office 365 admin console with an administrative user. And on my left navigation here, I have scrolled down to the bottom, and over on the left menu here, I will find that there's actually an option for Azure Active Directory that I can click on.
Does everyone use this portal? Is it something that you use regularly? Because I mean, I don't know about you guys, but the portal, every time I log on to the portal, it completely changes. There's new features and buttons and functions. So
should we click on that and see what we can't use anymore while it's in preview?
Well, possibly.
Yeah.
I don't know, it might break your demo.
Yeah.
But the main one is that access to that Azure AD. So I don't know if you haven't been in there recently, Microsoft have made that much easier to find and access that Azure AD piece that's specific for your Office 365 tenant.
Right, I'm just going to log in. So usually this is transparent, but my session's obviously timed out. So do this beforehand. Click that, make all the security guys unhappy, get you signed in. Who here uses the Azure AD environment or the Azure tenant at all? So this will look very familiar to you. So this is using the classic portal at the moment. When you go through the process of accessing your Azure Active Directory for the first time behind an Office 365 subscription, it'll ask you to register and get things set up. You're using Azure Active Directory Basic at that point, so it'll ask you for details either as a credit card or through an enterprise agreement. You're not charged for this service if you're using the basic level. If you're using EMS, then you're getting Azure Active Directory Premium along for the ride. In this instance here, we're just using a standard directory instance. although we did, I think, add EMS to this, so the reports may look a little bit different. So I've just opened my Active Directory instance here, and I'm going to come across to the right-hand side and click on Reports. So there's a Reports menu just there I'm going to click on. And then for this demo, we're going to have a look at a few sample reports where we've created some good data that will give you a feel for what it can do when the internet decides to work. I think it was Stu Fox said that things always work faster before you actually start the demo, and then once you start the demo, everything just kind of falls off a cliff. It's, okay, who's downloading the whole last season of Dexter or something on the internet down here?
This was working quickly at 8 o'clock.
Yeah. All right, let's just convince it that it needs to load a bit faster than that. There we are. Okay, good. So this view of the world's a little bit complicated by the fact that we actually do have EMS added to this tenant. So you'll see the reporting layout was slightly different to the one we had on the screen before. The ones that I did want to have a look at though was, I'm going to have a look at irregular sign-in activity here. And this is basically an amalgamation of all the other reporting types that you get at this particular level. So if you want a quick overview of what's going on in your environment, then this is a good place to start. I'm going to come in and open this report up. Hopefully it opens a bit quicker than the first page. All right, so we've got 3 samples showing here. We've got 3 items that the infrastructure behind Azure Active Directory is highlighted that we might want to be paying attention to. I get 3 logins. These are all very similar. I think the middle one's quite interesting. So it says signed in from an atypical location distant from the previous location within a short time. So it's really a combination of things. It's looked at my user and it's looked at the locations that I typically log in and use Office 365 from. And then it's noticed that at some point I've suddenly started logging in from another location. I've also done that from a very far distance away from where my first set of logins were from, but it's noticed that I didn't sign in from a location that I normally sign in from, so it's flagging that as something that I need to pay attention to. The other 2 are multiple geography logins, so let's go and just have a quick look at those. So this is kind of like a summary page. If we want to dig into these in a little bit more detail, we click into the appropriate report. This is pretty cool stuff, actually. I think this is pretty awesome that you get this sort of visibility.
Yeah, these sort of insights and this information in many cases isn't available to the average company in their on-premise environment. So, again, these are the sort of controls that you really step up to, and the operational reporting and insights that you get, as a benefit of using the Office 365 platform.
So we've got 5 instances where we've looked at AAD's looked at these sign-ins and has gone, well, the first sign-in, say for that first one, was here in Brisbane. In Brisbane. The next one was from Redmond, Washington. So I've done this using virtual machines in Azure in different environments, so I can pretend to be somebody that's broken the impossible travel scenario. You'll see that the first 2 are interesting because they're 16 hours apart and then they're 15 hours apart, or they're almost 16 hours apart. And you'll see that the estimated travel time between these 2 physical locations is 18 hours. So we've only just come under what would be an impossible travel scenario. But there might be cases where actually you can do that. So there is obviously something you would take with a grain of salt there. But fairly obviously those bottom 3 where there's a matter of minutes between the 2 different locations would suggest to you that you probably want to be having a talk to that user. The next thing also that you can do from here as well, if you see something that you're really not happy about and you can't either get in contact with that user or you really want to stop the activity right now, you can come in here and you can use these activities at the bottom here. So you could, for instance, force the user to start to use multiple factors of authentication at that point. So you could force that to be turned on. You could force a password reset on that user. So if there is a risk that this user's account's been compromised, yes?
Getting that information in the reports is a bit of a
Yes.
We only go through them once a week.
Mhm.
Get alerts sent to you when they happen.
If you get, there are instances, if you get a certain number of anomalous events happening, you'll get sent an email. It is less than ideal that it's after the event, but what you've got to remember is that it's actually parsing, millions and billions of login authentications against Azure Active Directory. So doing that with real-time analytics, I don't have any visibility on the roadmap for this feature set. You would hope at some point they would have that capability because, as you said, having retrospective information is not ideal. But my response also would be, before you haven't had access to any of this information, so you would have been unaware that that was going on. But yes, I would agree that after the fact is not useful.
I think the goal is to be able to have this information available to.
It's nice you store it, but if I don't go into the reports and query them every month,
Yep.
one could easily slip past.
So it will email you. The system will actually email you if you have a certain number of anomalous events occur in your Active Directory environment. The tenant administrators will receive an email that tells them that there's been anomalous activity. But there's got to be a threshold because there are always going to be false positives in these environments. The next one I did just want to quickly talk about was sign in from IP addresses with suspicious activity. Actually, that wasn't the one I want. Sign-ins from unknown sources. You look at that and you go, well, how can it be an unknown source? Because surely they have an IP address. Otherwise, they wouldn't be connected to the internet. Excuse me. And what's actually happening here is Microsoft's using the intelligence that they've gained out of running their services generally to know about anonymizing proxies and Tor endpoints. So if they see a login from a known anonymized proxy or Tor endpoint, they will flag that login because you probably don't want your legitimate users logging in behind anonymized proxies or Tor endpoints. And it probably suggests that that account has been compromised and someone's trying to hide their location. There are a bunch of other advanced reports that do some more stuff like go out and trawl the dark web for user credentials. And if they find your user's credentials somewhere on the dark web, they will flag that user account as under threat or potentially compromised. So you'll get that insight as well. Again, it's not real time, but it's information that you otherwise wouldn't have access to. Okay, so I'm going to hand back to James. Where are we? 5. So the next slide's actually, I think, after that, if you go forward one. So that's the type of email you get.
Example of the a bit of a summary of your AAD weekly status. So like Simon mentioned, if you're starting to see lots of activity happening, you can have a threshold to increase the rate of notification for that those messages. I think that the plan is definitely to have integration from the AAD reports to be able to integrate with your on-premise SIEMs and your on-premise tools that you use to do that operational security reporting.
I think there's a question. There was just a question down there.
Hey, Pete.
You said integrating with OMS.
I think I don't know whether the Microsoft guys who sit just behind you, but I'm not aware of that roadmap. But it sort of makes sense. I mean, if you think back to the keynote, how sort of all of these machine learning and analytics sort of painting that sort of picture of your end-to-end environment, I would suggest that that's probably something that might be being looked at. But I'm not specifically aware of that. Did you want to do the?
Up to you.
Yeah, you go.
Okay, cool. Thanks, James. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about admin account protection improvements. A big pain point for a lot of people, excuse me, that are already using Office 365 has been, it's great, I've got multi-factor authentication in my environment and I can switch it on for as many or as few users as I would like. However, if I have administrators that use PowerShell to do their job day to day, I haven't been able to use MFA for them because there's not been the ability in the PowerShell environment to do that step up and that second factor of authentication. Additionally, when you set up the service originally, there was one global administrator. You could assign many people to that role, but they were a global administrator. They can control SharePoint Online, Skype for Business Online, Exchange Online, you name it. They had God rights across all of those, and that made some people uncomfortable and was quite often called out as a major concern when it comes to separation of duties. There is now, it's still in preview, but I would hopefully expect that it will be in GA in the not too distant future. There is now multi-factor support in the PowerShell commandlet set. So you can go to Connect today and download a package that will update the authentication framework inside of the PowerShell commandlets to allow you to do that. And as we know, there are a range of administrative roles inside of Office 365 that align with the individual service pillars that you have deployed in a typical tenant. So I'm going to hand over to James, who's going to go through a demo for this for us.
Thanks. Yeah, so previously, before you had the 8L support in the PowerShell module, you basically couldn't use multi-factor auth for administrators, or what you had to do was you had an administrator account that you would use through the portal to enforce with multi-factor, and then you'd have to have a second administrator account that you would need to use for PowerShell access, and you wouldn't be able to provide multi-factor auth for that. So in the demo today, we're going to increase one of the guys' privileged access, our mate Johnny. We're going to make him a global admin. So we could make custom.
Maybe just show the customised, just click the customised ones. So they're all the different roles that you now have available to you. So you can even do things like, if someone in your organisation takes care of billing, you could make them a billing administrator, and that would be the only components in the portal they'd be able to see.
So I think some of those ones are always available, but
Yep.
it's certainly the Skype for Business and the SharePoint administrators, because traditionally those sort of functions would be held by different people within your organisation. And then if you think about platforms like Exchange, then Exchange also then has its fine-grained role-based access control within Exchange itself as well. So you can then get to the next level of allocation of administrative duties within there as well. For this example though, we're just going to make him a global admin.
So turn the phone up.
Okay. Close that.
Yep.
Might close that. So now if I launch my PowerShell, and then I want to connect to the service. So you just note that you can't pass, when you're using the 8L, you can't pass the credential attribute through. That won't work. You need to just launch the Connect MSN Online service. And you'll see there that it's now launched your Azure Active Directory login, which is then going to step me through the multi-factor auth process.
Tell you what, doing these demos, you get used to typing on Microsoft.com a lot. Doesn't get any easier.
It is. So this is now going, so that it's registered through
Click on this.
Simon's.
Yep.
Phone. So we'll see there that we just got a code on the phone. I don't know if you can see that there. What's the code? So there we go, and that's now just, so you can see there that that's now just authenticated
Yeah.
us to the platform and given us the ability to do that.
And that works for the Connect SPO service as well.
Yep.
Yeah, so you just don't provide the credential argument, and it will do that step-up prompt for you as well.
Yeah, and with the multi-factor auth, when you're doing your registration, you can select whether you want to have it to a mobile device or whether you want to get a phone call to a desk phone or a landline, or use the multi-factor auth app to get a one-time token password as well. So we've just used the text message example there. So yeah, that's a example of how you can, really start to step up that protection and security of your privileged access accounts.
So that is in preview at the moment, just to be clear. You
Yep.
can go and download the bits for that from Connect. Typically, we wouldn't recommend you use preview components in a production environment, but we've been using it for a while now, and it's been pretty rock solid. At the end of the day, it's a key part of the component of the platform, but it's the authentication piece. It doesn't actually affect any of the commandlets you're using under the cover because you've already set up your security context by the time you're calling those. What I did want to talk about next, though, was this is new. This is in preview. It's in deep preview. If you want to access it, you've got to go and register for it. But I did want to talk about it because to the gentleman's question earlier about having real-time insights and analytics out of your environment, Microsoft's investing heavily in that. We probably all know and love the existing reporting API that exists, the reporting web service that you've got available to attach to. The management API and the services API don't replace that. They'll be in addition to that feature. And what they will provide is they'll provide the ability to use a webhook-based publication subscription model to write third-party add-ins that connect into the back-end platform behind Office 365 and allow you to gain insights to what's going on inside of your environment. Michael talked about this yesterday, and really what this is aimed at initially is the ISV market, so the people that would allow you to do monitoring and maintenance, monitoring of your environments will be the people that this is primarily targeted at. However, there is public information available about these APIs and how you can connect to and use them. It will give you additional insights above and beyond what you get out of the reports today. The report service at the moment tends to be very much an amalgamation of the reporting capabilities that come from the products that make up Office 365, whereas the management API will actually be much more than that. What I was going to demo, because I don't have access to the management API, unfortunately, was just to show you a little bit of the neatness that you actually get with the existing reporting API, though. This is a quick demo. I'm going to use everyone's favourite data management tool, Excel, to do this. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go and connect to a data source. Sources, where are we? Okay, where did my other data sources go? So it collapsed my ribbon because my screen's small. That was good. Okay, I'm going to cheat a bit here, because I can never remember the URL. What's it done with Notepad? Being on the Windows Insider preview is fun, except when you're trying to demo stuff. Okay, and I don't have the URL there. Awesome, okay. This is about as close to live coding as you get in this demo. I'm sorry. I'm going to authenticate this session using a set of credentials that have the necessary permission to access the API. So in this case, just an administrator account. So at this point, it comes back and tells me that the URL is wrong.
Yeah, I think you had that at the end.
Oh, WVC. Oh, why wouldn't that work? Okay, so what this has done is gone off and it's enumerated the tables that are being presented out of the OData endpoint by the reporting web service, and there's a lot of them. For the purpose of this demo, what I'm going to have a look at is I'm going to have a look at the client software browser detail. And it is an interesting one because it does tend to come up quite a lot, particularly when you're standing up an Office 365 environment where a lot of the initial interaction from users can be browser-based. A lot of corporates don't know what browsers they have deployed in their environment, so this can be a quick and easy way to gain that insight if you want. I'm going to import this into a pivot chart. So thankfully this isn't a tenant with an extensive amount of data, so this shouldn't take too long to pull down. Let's make this chart a bit bigger. And then I get all of these fields that I can actually add into this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the name, the version, account finally, the display name. So display name is actually the user. So when you access this component, you do need to be aware that there is information about your users available through some of these reports. So it is important to make sure you manage that information appropriately. Just by simply adding those 4 fields, I can see what browsers are being used most heavily to access the environment and who's using them. And then I have the ability to drill down on what I want. So I can turn off, I want to see a little bit more about Chrome on its own, so I can go in and I can actually just filter that out if I want. Now, where it gets interesting is I can actually come in, and if I select last access time, what will happen is it will actually expand out last access time. So last access time is presented initially as just a field of date time, but what it will actually do is actually pull that apart and then allow me to do by date, by hour, by minute, by second. So I could actually drill right down into when people are using these things. So I could see, you know, let's have a look and show me, let's just see, when was the last time I used this? So 17th of November, and been most heavily using Chrome. So that's just some of the insights you can get out of the reporting API today. As Michael said, the management API will integrate with third-party vendor solutions primarily in the first instance, but if you do want to write some mechanism to integrate with it yourself, the API has public information available up on TechNet about it. You can ask for access to the preview program as well. It requires you to apply for it and be approved, yes.
Power BI?
So there will be a Office 365 content pack coming for Power BI. It's been talked about. I haven't seen an ETA on when it will be available and whether it uses the existing reporting API or the new management API, but it's certainly been talked about, but no deadline on that. I did want to use Power BI for this, but the way the OData endpoints are presented by the reporting service isn't supported by the current Power BI desktop that you can download at the moment. Otherwise, I would have shown you in Power BI. Okay, so that's that demo. I'll hand it back to James.
Cool. Thanks, Simon. Okay. So that's, I guess, talking through some of the operational security mitigations, and we'll move through to the data security mitigations. So what we were talking about before is controlling some of those devices that maybe are unknown and you know, BYODs and things like that. What we're talking about here is we have the ability using the out-of-the-box mobile device management platform within Office 365 to start to put some conditional access and some control around what types of devices are connecting to your environment. Now, there's support for devices across cross-platform support. So I think you would have heard a lot during the conference about Microsoft's support for multi-platform for Android, Windows and iOS devices. So one thing to note though, there are some limitations around the versions of operating systems and things that are compliant. So you can't just go and pick up any device and connect to it. There's also the ability within the out-of-the-box mobile device management policies to start to enforce through this conditional access policy some quite granular types of settings, I should say. So looking at various security settings, so things like enforcing that there's password control on the device, enforcing the device to be encrypted, making sure that there's no tampering with the OS and things as well. And then we also support the ability to do selective wipe and full wipe based on these conditional access scenarios. So if you have, I think we saw some of this in the demo in the keynote the other day, but if you have personal data on your device, obviously you don't want to, if a user leaves the organisation and you wipe the device, you obviously don't want to wipe that personal data. So you're only going to be wiping, you know, the corporate email application or the corporate OneDrive application and so on and so forth. So I think we'd talk about the ability to extend the protection before we jump into a demo. But I think like we talked through earlier in the slides before, so that's the out-of-the-box Office 365 mobile device management capability. and Simon's going to demo that in a minute. But like everything, we have the ability to extend that capability and move into more of a mobile application management style capability through the Intune capability within EMS. You can start to bring in applications managed through the corporate portal. And then you can start to do some of that cool stuff that we saw in the demo in the keynote the other day, where we can block copying and pasting, block screenshots, and start to really control how data flows between personal and private applications. So on that, we'll hand over to
Sure.
Simon.
Thanks, James. Okay, so we're going to go back to our good old trusty Office 365 portal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down and we'll see there's a mobile management section here in the left navigation. So I'm going to select that. So we, sorry, excuse me. Helps if I get the right tenant. So the reason we didn't use the other tenant is that it already has the EMS deployed into it, and when you deploy EMS into a tenant and you start enabling licenses for it, what it does is it replaces the inbuilt MDM solution that's baked into the core Office 365 offering. So here we are, where we were 30 seconds ago. Going down to my mobile management section. I've already pre-registered a device. The reason I did that is because it can take a little while for all those registrations to flow through all the various components inside of Office 365. So you'll see here I have a test user called David Longmuir who's already registered his Windows phone. James touched on the fact that we can do iOS and Android devices. We can also manage Windows Phone and Windows RT devices running 8.1 and above. So in this case, I'm running Windows Phone 8.1. I will quickly show you the process that we went through to get here. So you can do this. This is specific to Windows Phone, obviously, but I added a workplace account. I added my email address. It took me to Intune. So this is still using Intune behind the scenes, but you don't have access to the full feature set. Once I've added it, I get a nice message telling me within the next hour we'll probably push some policy to your device, so be prepared. When I set this device up, I hadn't enabled a PIN or a password on the phone, so it was just literally I could turn the phone on and access it. A little while later, when I turned the phone on, I had this waiting for me. And what had happened is that the MDM component of Office 365 had pushed down policy to my device and said, you must actually set a minimum 4-digit PIN. So I did the new PIN, and once I did that, I had access to my corporate account. Now the experience obviously differs a little bit per device. There's also the ability to do this via email, where the inbox of the user, when they set up their account, will receive an email from the platform that says, in order to continue to use Office 365, you must first enroll your device. They'll click on a link. They'll be asked to log in to their Office 365 account in a web session, which is effectively doing a login Intune registration. The device will be registered in Intune, and then they'll be able to will be registered in Office 365, and they'll be able to continue to access their email. What I do have is that phone that we had before. So if I log into this and I go to my email, so I've already registered this device, so I have access to all the email that I have here. I have an email from the administrator of this tenant which suggests to me that perhaps they're unsure about what's going on my phone. If I flick back to my admin console here, you'll see I've registered this device. I have the ability over here on the left to do a full wipe or a selective wipe. Now I love my phone and I love all the things that I have on it, so I'm not going to do a full wipe, but I am going to do a selective wipe. So let's see what happens to my phone when I do a selective wipe. So selective wipe, okay, choose yes. Now when I do a selective wipe, what will happen is that the phone will be pushed out of management. Again, this may not be one of those things that happens immediately because of the joys of the cloud and the fact that it's probably going out to a multitude of back-end services to make that happen. So we might just let that sit for a little while and see what happens to my phone. We'll come back to that later. As I said, once I do this, David Longmuir's phone will disappear from the environment because it's no longer under management. I've removed all the corporate data that I wanted to take off of it, so I don't care about that device anymore. It doesn't stop David coming back and re-enrolling his device at some point in future if he wants, if he gets it back, if it's been stolen, or he gets a new device. But that was kind of the extent of the demo that we wanted to show. So let's just see what's happened down on my device here.
While you're doing that, it's worth noting that you can apply these policies based on groups as well. So this is available out of the box today. So you might not want to go and set this up for all users across the board, but you might want to set up a pilot group of users where you can test the different experiences across the different device platforms and things like that. And then, you obviously, like most of the things in Office 365, you'll see the tech stuff's not hard, but it's the organisational change stuff around that as well. So you want to make sure that people understand these messages that they're getting on their phone and what their various experiences are and things like that.
Okay, so very much aware of where we're at with the time. So I'm going to flick back over just to the last section, and then we've got one more demo after that, and then we'll take questions.
Cool. So the next, if you think back to those 5 mitigating controls or top risks that we sort of see, this data leakage protection was very much at the top of our pile. So data leakage protection, again, is another control that's available to us out of the box within Office 365. It's sort of was originally available in Exchange Online. It's now available across, or it has been for a little while, but it's now available across all of those different platforms or workloads within Office 365. Again, protecting your data is one of the #1 concerns. This is something that is very much encouraged for you to have a look at. Microsoft, and again, in Michael's session yesterday, we looked through the Compliance Centre, so I won't talk too much about it, but the Compliance Centre is a single pane of glass where you can start to look at all of your policies and reports and things like that. Another quick note for Australian customers is that there's very much Australian rule templates and things like that available to you out of the box, so you don't need to go and create custom templates and custom policies. You have the ability to do that if you have some specific data types in your organisation that you want to fingerprint and protect against. This is in the process, especially DLP for OneDrive for Business is currently rolling out to new tenants. So on that note, we'll get into the demo, just conscious of our time.
So let's talk about the OneDrive.
Oh, sorry.
OneDrive
Yeah,
stuff first.
actually, before we do that. Yeah, and the other component, like we said, talked about data accessing devices anytime, anywhere. People freak out a bit about that. A new control that's available to you within OneDrive is to enforce OneDrive for business domain join. So what this means is that we can actually stop OneDrive libraries from syncing to unmanaged devices or non-domain joined devices. It does have support for multiple Active Directories, so if you have an organisation that has multiple downstream directories, then you can put different GUIDs in place to authorise directories to access the OneDrive sync library. This is a relatively new feature though. It doesn't block mobile clients, so if you still have somebody accessing OneDrive across a mobile, it's only protecting you against workstation access. Doesn't work for Mac clients, unfortunately, at the moment. And then there's no retrospective file deletion for remote devices. So if you already have OneDrive out there and people are already syncing it all over the place, you can't then go in and apply this control and then pare back that information that's already synced out there. So on that note, we'll get into the demo.
Cool. I'm going to rip through this last bit. I did want to just quickly show the policy change has been pushed to my device. So you'll see that my device is now no longer required to have a password, so I can close that. I still have it set. When I have in here, you'll see that I now have my account deleted. So if I close that and I go into back to my home screen and I try and open in here, you'll see that what will happen is it'll give me an error message. No, okay. so it's still registered. So I would say that's just a timing thing on my device. All right, cool. So the last thing I'm going to just quickly demo is the OneDrive domain and non-domain join. So we've already pre-configured our tenant to allow domain join devices only and pre-configured it with domain. I won't go through how we get to that stage. Here I am on a machine that is actually domain join. I'm going to hit the sync button and do sync now, and I'll just get the standard OneDrive, the OneDrive for Business experience, and it will sync that library down. Over here, I have a machine that is not domain joined. I'm logged in with exactly the same user that I was on the other machine. And if I click sync here, I'll still get a little bit of the song and dance at the start of the process. Hopefully, if IE hasn't decided to get stuck with that. No, there we are. All right, so it still looks good. Yeah, I'm going to sync this. We couldn't sync this library. This library isn't available offline, so I've effectively blocked somebody who isn't on my domain being able to sync a library down. James obviously talked about the limitations on this. This is new. It's going to improve over time, like most things in Office 365. That's it. Really quick demo. I'm going to hand back to James, who's going to wrap up for us.
All right, so just to kind of quickly wrap up the session so I can get some questions in. So just the key takeaways. So like we said at the beginning, we want to help you turn any of those security no's into yeses. Understand that there's lots of controls and mitigating controls available in the base platform. That's getting better. We encourage you to be aware of those controls and apply them. If you're in that pre-purchase mode, so you're thinking about consuming Office 365, you're going through your due diligence, things like that, have a look at those 5 pillars that Simon talked about trust, compliance, etc. And then leverage the Trust Center as well. So there's lots of information in that resource that can help you. If you're already using Office 365, which I think from the show of hands earlier, most of you are, you can look at strengthening admin access through that role-based access control and multi-factor auth. Just noting that the PowerShell components still are in preview, so you probably don't want to be running preview stuff in production. But you can certainly apply MFA to administrators accessing stuff through the portal. The data leakage protection and other configurations, such as the OneDrive for domain join devices only, they're easy, simple controls that you can start to have a look at and plan to roll out that is going to take your security posture and protection to the next level. And again, as we've mentioned a couple of times, and you would have seen in the keynote demo earlier in the week, EMS upgrade is going to give you a whole bunch more advanced features than what we've shown you out of the box today. I think that was all. So on that note, do we have any questions? I know we had a couple of questions through the session. Is there anything? Yep.
So when you're using Federated Portal with AFS, how much of the functionality in the Azure AD portal do you lose, like the reports and stuff, and what still works?
So when you're using, so the question is, if you're using federated identity, do you still get those reports through the portal? The answer is yes. So when you're using federated identity, the authentication is still going back into Azure AD, and it's still tracking all of that, those logins and those various information. So you'll still get that rich reporting out of that resource.
So if we've already invested in an MDM for our on-premises
Yep.
environment, which isn't Office 365, what do you see customers doing around the features that Office 365 offers? Do they coexist? Do they replace one for the other?
So the question is, if I've already selected or already using an MDM product, how does that integrate with those features within Office 365? So I think that so Office 365 and certainly EMS, mobile device management, sort of brings that containerized approach. So you start to get some of that that rich functionality that we saw in the keynote session on Tuesday. So if you're using a third-party MDM product, you won't get that necessarily get that rich integration. But there's nothing to stop you from still using it to manage those other features and components of that. I think Michael touched on that a little bit in his session yesterday. So if you have a look at some of the
There's-
information in there.
There was also that discussion around the fact that if you're standing up and you've got an existing MDM, Microsoft's now taking the approach that you can use Intune to manage
Just the app management.
do app
Yep.
management without having to take on the MDM stuff. Really, the goal of showing the mobile device management capabilities in Office 365 in this session was maybe more aimed at those people that don't have an existing MDM solution in place, rather than this is a replacement for your Air Watches or whatever you've already got in place. And it's a common discussion we have with a lot of our enterprise customers, because many of them already have either MDM as a service from a provider that's giving them other services, or they've got an MDM capability already. So yeah, it's a common question.
Any more questions? So we'll be down at the speaker lounge as well later on, and feel free to come and chat to us after the session. So again, quick wrap up. If you've got any questions, you can tweet us or you can email us. Or again, don't forget the user groups if you're interested to come along. Oh, sorry, there's a photo there. Take a photo. Come along to the user groups if you're in Sydney. And then don't forget that the Office 365 Pro Yammer network, so if you guys are using Yammer, jump on that and get engaged. So thank you all for coming. Appreciate that. First session of the day, 8:15 in the morning, so thanks for coming along. And complete your session eval, so we'd love to hear your feedback. And I think there's some daily prizes that you can win if you fill those out. So thank you.
Thank you.